Holy crud, this was wild and awesome. Greetings, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you are here. Today's nonsense is in Exporer. That's right, Exporer, the brand new format that is pioneerly, if you will. Pioneer at home, perhaps, and more specifically, it is Pioneer Legality with cards that are on Arena. So it's not additional sets or anything than what you've seen in historic and recent memory, but it is minus all of the digital-only cards and things like that. Notably, the ban list is currently Pioneer as well, so there will be some faces that you are unfamiliar with in Historic because they have been banned. Chief among them is Winota. Folks, I am a big fan of basically every single non-rotating format. Well, every format, honestly, but I really like non-rotating formats. That's my cup of tea. So Explorer, I am likely to be a big fan of as well as, you know, things move forward. But as it stands, there is a gigantic elephant in the room named Winota. It is currently about 30% of the average matches in Explorer. So if you're going to be going into the format of Explorer, you need to be prepared for Winota. That's what we're all about today. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say this deck is designed specifically because, you know, it's going to have a 90% against Winota or something like that, but we absolutely should have a positive win rate against Winota. I have played versions of this deck in Historic, and it's always been good. This looks a little bit like a pile of cards, I'll admit, but it's always consistently been above 60% win rate. And we did play this same exact deck in Explorer during a whole stream, whatever, 5 or 6 hours worth of streaming, and wound up at about a 60% win rate there in Explorer as well, including up against the Winota matches and stuff. This is gameplay that is brand new, so even if you watch that stream, you will still be getting brand new games. All that being said, what are we doing here? Well, we're Brash Taunting. Folks, whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, deals that much damage to target opponent. So we're then trying to make sure to keep the board clean, using things like Anger the Gods, Sweltering Suns, and then spot removal spells like Abrades, Bonecrusher Giants, Chandra technically is single target removal, Sweeper, and single target removal, and can't be countered all in one card, Chandra Awakened Inferno, as well as some very dedicated Winota hate here in a Grafdigger's Cage and 2 Weathered Runestones, because of course, remember folks, in this case non-land permanents, and in this case creatures, but in Winota it's the same, can't enter the battlefield from graveyards or libraries. That's right. So when your opponent slams a Winota and attacks you with 3 creatures, the problem isn't the 3 creatures that are attacking, it's the 3 creatures that are coming out of the library, right? Well, okay, they can't enter the library. So in Winota matchups, these are very important, but not strictly required because the board sweepers, we sweep away the board in, you know, beforehand. What about the actual win conditions? Well, we're running some Chandras, right? And these are perfectly fine win conditions, but they're not the primary win condition. They are the backup win condition. The primary win condition here is actually Brash Taunter, so that when we are doing all this damage-based removal here, we can start pointing it at our own Brash Taunter, or incidentally hitting our Brash Taunter, as it were, and hitting our opponent's face. Well, there's one specific card that many of you are likely to be thinking, hey, why aren't you running Star of Extinction? Star of Extinction says deal 20 damage to everything, all creatures, all planeswalkers, and destroy 1 target land. So it's a kind of a thing where you destroy an opponent's land and then also sweep the board. Well, our backup win condition being planeswalkers means we're killing our own planeswalkers when we don't have Brash Taunter in play. Yes, it is a combo. Yes, we kill our opponent on the spot. Yeah, I know. It's very cool. But instead of that, we actually are running Fiery Emancipation. Not only is it 1 mana cheaper, but it plays well with the rest of our entire deck. Fiery Emancipation says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead. So, if we have Fiery Emancipation and Brash Taunter down, which of course is what we would be looking for, we would need to have Brash Taunter down and then Star of Extinction. Well, if we have Brash Taunter down and Fiery Emancipation down, any other card in our deck essentially wins the game, almost. So Chandra, Torch of Defiance, deals 4 damage to target creature. So we target our own Brash Taunter. Well, if a source deals damage, it deals triple. So Chandra then deals 12 damage to Brash Taunter. Brash Taunter is then a source dealing damage. It's tripled. So then we deal 36 damage to our opponent's face, right? Sweltering Suns, Anger the Gods. There are 7 here. 3 damage to each creature. If we have Fiery Emancipation, Brash Taunter in play, that's 3 damage, which is triple to 9, which is triple to 27 on our opponent's face. That's right. So essentially, while it's cool, I'll admit, the Star of Extinction is largely superfluous. So we're keeping it. The only other outlier you might be thinking here is, what the heck is Golden Guardian doing here? And believe it or not, in different versions of this deck, like in Historic and things, we've ran more copies of this. We've had to remove some copies because we need these Grafdigger's Cage and Weathered Runestones for some of the matchups, right? But just as a one-of, unfortunately, I would really like to at least have 1 or 2 more, but it fights another creature you control for 2 mana. Notably does not tap. When Golden Guardian dies, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, and occasionally that comes up, but not very often. The idea is, though, since it doesn't require us to tap, if we go turn 4 Golden Guardian, turn 5 Brash Taunter, turn 6 with a land drop, we fight, 12 damage. Of course, we do that on our opponent's end step, and they might not even kind of connect the dots. They might not realize, they often don't, I should say, realize what's about to happen to them. So we have Golden Guardian Brash Taunter on the battlefield, 6 untapped lands, and we just pass the turn. So they're thinking, what's going on here? And then they pass, they do their thing, they play their turn, they just cast their cards. Maybe they remove something, maybe they don't. But then we spend all the mana Brash Taunting. If these 2 survive, it spins around to the next turn, and we deal 12 more, and our opponent just dead on the spot, right? So definitely a lot of fun. I could talk about this deck for hours, but rather than do that, what if we played some games? All right, folks, here we are up against Otastam. Good luck, Otastam. And yeah, I think this hand is fine. It's a little awkward because, you know, we're running 4 lands. Anytime you run 4 lands, you run the risk of getting more lands. Darn it. And here it is, another mountain off the top. Not overly excited about that. Our opponent going to crash in for 1 off the Cauldron Familiar that came in on turn 1. We're going to go ahead and Bonecrusher Giant. Of course, we're thinking our opponent's obviously running sacrifice stuff, very obviously. We don't want to just point a Bonecrusher Giant at the Cauldron Familiar or anything, because we're expecting a Deadly Dispute or Village Rites or something, and sure enough, there is a Deadly Dispute. It is what it is. We're just going to go ahead and keep the train rolling. Move on with our life, so to speak. Otastam, now examining their options, does have access to 4 mana. Remember that treasure is over there from Deadly Dispute, but our opponent elects to slam a mountain, the first red source of the game, and get down an experimental synthesizer. Inconvenient. All right, so a land coming off the top of the library gets exiled, but a little awkward here because, of course, they already had to play a red source, so they could not take advantage of the experimental synthesizer exiling a land. We just Bonecrush their face, take the turn back, then hardcast our own Bonecrusher Giant to try and get a threat down. It's true, our opponent probably has quite a bit of removal, but, you know, if we're going to have to slog through it, might as well start now. Make them have it, so to speak. Opponent now examining their options, trying to consider how to go about it. They just take the turn back, not a big deal. Our current hand, a little awkward because we've just kept drawing a bunch of lands here, but we did finally pick up a Brash Taunter, so we're now on Anger the Gods, Sweltering Suns, and Brash Taunter, as well as 3 additional lands. Ay. Thank heavens for the built-in card advantage on Bonecrusher Giant. Our opponent does finally get their hands on a Witch's Oven and plays it out. Sacrifices a Cauldron Familiar. There's now 2 Cauldron Familiars in the bin and a food waiting to come back. Of course, that does turn on Fatal Push, and our opponent kills our Brash Taunter after taking 2 from Brash Taunter's ability. We're now trying to figure out how to navigate these next couple turns. Obviously, these board sweepers are not super great when our opponent has, you know, ways of sacrificing the creatures. Makes things just a little bit awkward. Oh boy, our opponent does have a land drop. Down to 2 cards in hand, though, which is kind of nice considering we just draw our our card for the turn, and we're now up to, you know, 7 cards in hand. The problem is it's not immediately playable. Okay. But you never like to just sit around and do nothing on turn 4 when you've got 6 cards in hand, but alas, here we are. It was a Fiery Emancipation, though, and Fiery Emancipation, of course, one of the key synergies in the deck. We now have Fiery Emancipation and Brash Taunter in our hand. We have a key decision this turn about whether or not to cycle the Sweltering Suns. There's a whole bunch of different reasons we might want to go about doing that. But Sweltering Suns does impact the board. We know our opponent's trying to go at least a little bit wide. The red-black sacrifice deck typically has you know, only Cult Anvils and that sort of thing. Oh boy, there's Sokenzen, Crucible of Defiance, sure. Not sure why they didn't do that pre-combat. Those have haste, folks. Those have haste. So, almost cycled, but finally elected not to, just deciding, you know what, let's try and just end this game. It doesn't, when we're putting a 5-mana 1/1 on the stack, it's not, you're not normally thinking to yourself, all right, we're like a turn or two away from victory here, so let's set this in motion. You're normally thinking, oh gosh, what have I done with all of these decisions that have led me up to this point? As it turns out, though, we are, in fact, trying to set up a victory. Brash Taunter and Fiery Emancipation, quite a combo. Really hoping our opponent doesn't have exile-based removal, though admittedly, these decks typically run very little, if any, exile-based removal. So we're feeling pretty safe. If they can't mount a sufficient offense here, we just get to put down Fiery Emancipation next turn. Then, the following turn, it's just GG. Right, so that's kind of what we're trying to line up here. If they go too wide, we may be forced to Sweltering Suns or Anger the Gods before the Fire Emancipation, because we do essentially have to take a whole turn off, right? Which is not typically what you want to do when you're facing down. In this case, holy crud, 5 creatures is an awful lot. But you know, we're standing stalwart. I think this is not that threatening yet. Sure enough, our opponent can't even justify going to combat there and skips right through the turn. We're going to play a land, and you know what? We're on this train. Let's ride it. Fiery Emancipation gets put on the stack. Opponent, with a single mana up there and a Witch's Oven activation ready to go, says, okay. And I'm not sure if they are reading the writing on the wall just yet, but we want to be ready to show them. Out of stem... Considering their options, and finally goes for the Deadly Dispute on Cauldron Familiar. Going to draw some cards to inform their decision. I can't imagine they just let a Witch's Oven trigger go away, but they do. Admittedly, I don't think it matters. I think that was our opponent's concession to, oh no, you know, sort of realizations happening here. And our opponent goes for the Witch's Oven, sacrificing a creature, adding a food, Cauldron Familiar, going to trigger that, and triggers the Oni Cult Anvil's ability to make a 1/1. They then sacrifice. We drop to 12, or from 12 down to 11, and our opponent adds a Gigant to the hand. Well, opponent, none of those things that you had going on there were good enough. We're just going to go ahead and slam Anger of the Gods. And then, nope. Actually, you know what? Let's give our opponent a math lesson. Instead of Anger of the Gods doing 27 to their face, let's go -6 with Chandra, Awaken, Inferno off the top. And instead of -6, no, it's going to deal a good chunk. 18, as a matter of fact, to Brash Taunter. And 54 to our opponent's face. GG, opponent. GG. All right, folks. Here we are up against Shiogi Circle. Good luck, Shiogi Circle. And I think this is a perfectly heavable hand. Demon Bolt hanging out over here behind me. We're going to go ahead and start on Den of the Bugbear, I do believe. We were trying to kind of plan out the order of spells. Wait a minute. Luxior Giada's Gift? What is going on over there? I cannot say for certain. It's possible we're supposed to just Abrade that right now, but then I'm thinking, no, let's wait, because we get to exile a Demon Bolt and Foretell, just kind of see how things go. Boy, oh boy, Reckoner Bankbuster. Our opponent's got some card advantage online as well. E-I-E-I-O. Well, suddenly I am filled with apprehension here. I have no idea the correct path to take, because Luxior obviously implies Planeswalkers, right? But considering we don't know anything about anything, I just decided to slam Weathered Runestone, because they're only going up to 3 mana this turn, and, you know, they could have anything, you know? So we're going to make a land drop here and pass. Our opponent, drawing a card with Reckoner Bankbuster. Awkward. We're considering the Abrade. You know, still thinking about maybe the Luxior, thinking maybe, actually, maybe it's supposed to be the Reckoner Bankbuster, right? Maybe we're supposed to just get that out of here. Paralyzed with indecision, we elect to do nothing. All right, Chandra, Torch, Defiance, come on down. This is a really good draw because the ability to add mana is very, very strong here. I think the play is potentially just, I'm supposed to Abrade the Luxior because we know nonsense is getting ready to happen. We elect to go for damage just to make sure to get something out of it because our opponent's probably playing some elements of control, right? Can't imagine they wouldn't be. Deadly Disputes away their Reckoner Bankbuster, draw even more cards off that thing. Plays a land, has a treasure, and Blood on the Snow. Kills our Chandra. That is tragic indeed. Well, okay, so suddenly I'm terrified for my life. We panic, activate Den of the Bugbear, and crash in for 4. Opponent drops to 14. 5 mana available, a single black, 2 white, and a pair of blue as well. Oh, followed up by another blue, and boom, Kaya the Inexorable? An Explorer? You heard that right. Kaya the Inexorable and Explorer, and with the extra mana, Luxior Giada's Gift becomes equipped to Kaya the Inexorable, and the counter goes on herself. Oh, man, folks. We are feeling terrible about this turn of events. This is just the worst. We do elect to make the best of a bad situation and Bonecrusher Giant and kill it. The problem is it goes right back to hand because Kaya put the counter on herself. Oh, I'm kicking myself now for not abrading that thing, but honestly, I'm not even mad. This is wild, and I am just glad to be a part of it. Really wish I had played it the way my instincts were telling me to originally, instead of more cautiously, you know? But our opponent slams Reckoner Bankbuster, draws a card from it. We're going to play a land, and trying to decide how to go about this. I go with Fiery Emancipation because we were thinking, okay, this isn't required for victory here. We know our opponent's on a slower moving thing. They're running board sweepers and the like, so we might be able to get there with Den of the Bugbear if we can make sure to get rid of these Kayas and things, right? Okay. That's the plan. Anyway, that's the plan. Oh my word, you're kidding me right now. Luxior Giada's Gift coming down a second time, and Kaya gets equipped. The fortunate thing for us here is that Kaya was unable to put the counter on herself because she had to tick down on our Fiery Emancipation. That line, while costly and painful, definitely paying off in spades here because the Luxior being able to go down on what's her name? Kaya, with the counter on it, makes it essentially immune to removal, and that would have been tragic indeed. All right, so Meadow Massacre coming down for Shiogi, and sweeps away our Bonecrusher Giant, trying to keep that board clean. We put Chandra, Torch, Defiance on the stack, and our opponent draws a card, probably looking for, like, Dovin's Veto, something like that. Doesn't find it, whatever they were looking for, and Chandra resolves. We're now faced with, you know, damage or mana. I think the choice is pretty clear here. We just slam the damage. It always feels bad when you exile something that otherwise would have been useful, but, you know, at least you get something. And oh my word, Another Blood on the Snow to destroy all of our Planeswalkers. Jeez Louise. That's the second Shadow Torch Defiance going the way of the Dodo. But our opponent is tapped down to just a single blue and a treasure. We make a land drop and decide, well, their options aren't great right now. Reckoner Bankbuster being tapped. They can't block with it effectively, but our chances of actually finishing the game off starting to dwindle for sure. Our opponent does elect to chump with the chump the Den of the Bugbear with the Pilot, which is, you know, terrifying. And I was gonna say, because they can't, you know, they're not just gonna let this stand. And in fact, they don't. They do have a Deadly Dispute, and oh my word, boom, Lolth hitting the battlefield with a thump and creating a pair of 2/1 menacing reach creatures. Jeez Louise, our hand is looking thin, their hand is looking thick, and if Lolth sticks around, it might even be thick with a pair of C's, as the kids say. So now we're faced with some really concerning, with a really concerning situation here. We can't really get in at the Lolth, and if we don't, we're going to be buried in card advantage, no questions asked. They could have, we know they're playing Planeswalkers, they could have, the Wandering Emperor here, but I think we've got to go for it anyway. We're going to go ahead, slam and Anger the Gods, activate it into the Bugbear, and try and get in at Lolth. The good thing about the Wandering Emperor is if they did in fact have it, the Den of the Bugbear has to be tapped, which means we get to have a Goblin that can still go in after Lolth and hopefully stop the card advantage. After some deliberation, I decide not to go at Lolth with the Den of the Bugbear. Just send the 1/1 at the Lolth. I do this because we're almost certain to have the opponent exile the Den of the Bugbear. And if that's the case, the outcome is the same. If they do just create a 1/1, they would be inclined to trade with the Den of the Bugbear. And the outcome is the same, right? But oh my word, the disaster happens. We do kill Lolth, but then they slam Elspeth Resplendent. I kid you not, folks. And boom, Luxior goes on to the Wandering Emperor. The Wandering Emperor pluses on herself. Elspeth Resplendent pluses on herself. And suddenly we're being attacked by a 7/7 First Strike Vigilant, the Wandering Emperor, wearing Luxior. I kid you not. Folks, I want to be angry right now, but I can't be. Holy crud, this was wild and awesome. We draw a Weathered Runestone off the top, and it's virtually meaningless here. It doesn't even really have text because we already have one, and I don't think even if we, you know, even if we didn't have an extra, like, it doesn't really do anything. So now, honestly, it feels a little bit like garbage time. I don't really want to scoop it up because I want to see if our opponent's, you know, like, has some more spice to toss at our way. And sure enough, Field of Ruin off the top. Not really spicy. Very feel bad, though. And what little, you know, opportunity we may have had, however unlikely, to come back in this game, evaporating very quickly. We now have 5 mountains, a pair of Field of Ruins, a pair of Weathered Runestones, and a Goblin. Backed up by naught but a Sweltering Suns. Our opponent's got an Elspeth Resplendent ticking up and a Wandering Emperor ticking up. Elspeth Resplendent has thrown a Vigilant counter on the Wandering Emperor and now a Lifelink counter on the Wandering Emperor. Wandering Emperor gives herself first strike until the end of turn, charging in for 13, I kid you not, 13 damage. Of course, we're forced to chump because it's lethal. And we pull off the Miracle Anger of the Gods? No. That's not going to do anything here. Nice. Good game, Shiogi. Good game. And they got us, but not even mad. Honestly, that was awesome. So thank you for the game, Shiogi. Thank you. All right, folks. Here we are up against Vector. Good luck, Vector. And yeah, this hand's a little awkward because we're on 4 lands again. Admittedly, we're running a lot, so you can't really complain about that sort of thing. And we have an Abrade and a couple of Sweltering Suns to back it up. Oh, crud, folks. This looks like Winota. Ay, Vector. has the Mage's Attendant version, which is really obnoxious because it allows them to, typically it's an evolution thing, whatever the heck that card is called, where they get to spend 2 mana, sacrifice a 3-drop, and go and find Winota, and they get to protect it because of the stinking counter target non-creature spell 1/1 that shows up. We elect to remove the Mage's Attendant because all on its own, it is also, I mean, it's a 3/2, it attacks. You know, that's a fine thing to be doing, you know? So our opponent does have Hallowed Fountain, comes in tapped, and just attacks in for 2. Okay, these things are fine. We're now sitting here debating on how to go about this. And we do elect that even though this is almost certain to be countered, it would be a punt to not counter it. I think we need to fire it off just to get the wizard off the battlefield and afford ourselves the opportunity in the future. If they do have a red mana and a Winota, which thank heavens they have the red mana but not the Winota, they could punish us a wee bit. But it is what it is. We're now debating whether or not to fire off the Sweltering Suns because, again, if they have the Winota, they kind of punish us here. I almost elect not to cast it because they could have sent the Stomping Ground and tapped and, you know, attacked anyway if they were going to do that. But considering the context of our hand, we're in really good shape if we can just last a little bit longer. So I do elect fire it off. Go for it. And just slam a Brash Taunter the next turn. Okay. All right. So now we're on decision time. Is it Fiery Emancipation? And if they've got it, we're feeling a little bad. Is it Chandra? Just for a generically powerful thing? Or is it Anger the Gods? And just get rid of that Gilded Goose? Well, folks, it may or may not have been the wisest decision. But Fiery Emancipation is the play because not only am I greedy, I want to have a good time. So Fiery Emancipation makes it to the battlefield. I could have attacked there, but I didn't want to run into a tapping and exiling thing. But sure enough, Tovolar's Huntmaster coming out of the hand. Our opponent recognizes that doesn't do it. And scoops him up. GG. Vector. GG. All right, folks, we're up against West 993. And this hand, again, it's got 4 lands in it. So, you know, you're always a little bit apprehensive when that happens. But you know what? Fine. We're going to go ahead and start on Den of the Bugbear. Little awkward. Our opponent, whenever they go with Temple Garden, Gilded Goose in Explorer, you're pretty certain it's Winota. And sure enough, darn it, they're on the play with the Mana Dork. We are chagrined to be certain. We decide to go for the killing the Gilded Goose because it does make things just a wee bit awkward on them attempting to get Winota down this turn. You know, the Jasper Sentinel is not Llanowar Elves, folks. It does not tap on its own. That you need to tap another creature to be able to do that, right? Well, that does take them off Winota, but they just cast another Gilded Goose. Darn it. Okay, we still don't have any Anger the Gods or Sweltering Suns, so we don't pull one off the top either. Okay. So now we're faced with a little awkward situation. We could just Bonecrusher Giant and hope to block. But I don't think that's a winning line if they have Winota. Our best chance is maybe if they miss a land drop, because 3 lands missing your 4th land does happen with some regularity. You're never happy when it does, but it does. And if that is the case, yes, they will only have 1 attacker. And sure enough, our gambit pays off. We're able to kill the Winota's escort there. And we do make a land drop and have Chandra Torch Defiance. Chandra Torch Defiance has this really interesting -3 mode that says destroy target Winota. And we're pretty excited about that. So our opponent unable to get their Winota value because of our Chandra Torch Defiance. Shocks in a Sacred Foundry, but no! There's another Winota! And sure enough, Gilded Goose crashes in, and the game ends, right? No, it's a whiff, thank heavens. We dodge a bullet, folks. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and now is one of those times. All right, so we have got a really interesting decision here. It's possible we were just supposed to slam Chandra Torch Defiance number 2. I elect not to do that, and I go with Chandra Awakened Inferno because it is a far better board presence than giving up a Chandra Torch Defiance to get down Chandra Awakened Inferno, right? Trying to think about how the game could potentially play out, we have a number of avenues to victory that involve Fiery Emancipation and just plussing Torch of Defiances, because every time you plus Torch of Defiance with Fiery Emancipation down, that's 6 damage, right? So we're trying to figure out how this game would most likely play out. Our opponent does have a really good Jaspera Sentinel into Seeka's Chariot, which is awkward. It's awkward to be sure, but it is what it is. Here I am debating how to go about this and trying to decide if I'm supposed to go with mana or Fiery Emancipation. They've already had 2 Winotas, so it seems pretty unlikely they have a third Winota. But one thing that I've learned about Magic is that as soon as you decide something is certain, it's not, right? So we elect to go with a little safer route, and honestly, I think this is a bit of a punt. I think I was just supposed to slam Fiery Emancipation, go up for damage, exile whatever the top card is, and deal 6 to their face. I think if I had to do it over, that's the decision I would have made, right? But, you know, when you've got a little bit of scarring left over from Winota, it can leave you feeling hollow inside, you know? So I elected to take an unnecessarily conservative route, right? Opponent animates their Seeka's Chariot, makes, you know, comes in, kills our Chandra Awakened Inferno. Chandra Torch Defiance takes a damage, but okay, it doesn't matter. All right, we found the win anyhow. Thank heavens. Chandra Torch Defiance going to go up. It doesn't matter what we find. We're going to exile it. Opponent going to gain some life, go up to 18, but, you know, a math lesson says 6 plus 6 plus 6, folks, is 18. And, of course, Chandra Torch Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent, but that's tripled because of Fiery Emancipation, and Stomp deals 2 damage anywhere, but it's tripled because of Fiery Emancipation. That's how it's 6 plus 6 plus 6. So GG, opponent, GG. It was an honor. All right, folks, here we are up against David. Good luck, David. And this is a really awkward hand. We really hope we're not up against something really aggressive. Whenever you have a 2-lander on the play, there's a good chance you just don't play Magic, right? 2-lander on the draw, you're pretty likely to draw your 3rd land, but then sometimes you don't, and you get punished. Well, a 2-lander on the play, you don't even get that first draw. So naturally, as I'm sitting here saying, not mono red, not mono red, not mono red, our opponent plays Basic Mountain Fanatical Firebrand. I die just a very small amount inside, and they crash in for 1. We do, fortunately, though, draw a mountain for our first land, or for our first draw step, which is very, very good. Admittedly, we're on 27 lands, folks. You know, we shouldn't miss too many land drops, but, you know, you only miss land drops when you don't really need them, you know? So it is what it is. We sit here and debate for just a hot minute about the anger of the gods. Every point of damage you give up against the mono red deck, you know, is 1 point closer to death. It's it's a game of inches typically in this matchup. So the anger of the gods on the Fanatical Firebrand alone is very, very, you know, possible line. We elect to wait. They do hit us for 1 and then cast the other half of Bonecrusher Giant as we anticipated they would, and then they cast a Torbran. The obvious line here is just Chandra Torch Defiance tick down, but naturally, I'm worried. Okay, we've only seen creatures from them. So this is probably a creature-heavy version. Let's get down Brash Taunter and hopefully try and slow the game down just a little bit. It's the greediest line I could possibly imagine, and naturally I took it because I am the greediest person you can possibly imagine, I guess. Bonecrusher Giant hits us for 4. Oh, crud. Bonecrusher Giant hits us for 4. Oh, crud. Skewer the Critics for 5? We're at 2 against the mono red deck? What have I done? At this point, I have decided that every decision I've ever made is suspect, and I ought not make any more. We do finally decide to come on down, Chandra Torch Defiance, get rid of Torbran, because our only possible path to victory here is going to be one that involves our opponent going like land, Bonecrusher, Bonecrusher, because they don't have anything else, right? Well, okay. So if they had, you know, more attackers, they could just get in for the 2. Of course, we cannot kill these folks because the Abrade, if we target a Bonecrusher Giant, we take 2. Shatterskull Smashing, a great card, but we, you know, if we target them, we take 2. So now we're trying to decide, do we go up for damage or just up for mana? We elect to go up for mana so that we can sweep Chandra. Opponent takes some damage. We're going to swing in, and now the Abrade gives us insulation against small, hasty things, right? Well, speaking of small, hasty things, here comes Fanatical Firebrand. E-I-E-I-O. I am decidedly not thrilled about this. Trying to consider all the implications. Naturally, I'm like, go after the Planeswalker, please? They elect not to, so we're okay. Well, our Abrade Gambit pays off. And we kill the Fanatical Firebrand. Okay, well, fine. Shadow Torch Defiance go up. Hey, it's Stomp, folks. That's one we can cast. We send it. Shadow Awaken Inferno go up for an emblem. Bonecrusher Giant come down. We now have a blocker. We can crash in for 1. Not that that's a huge amount, but darn it. We can block. We can deal a little damage. Starting to do the math here, folks. Brash Taunter is on the battlefield. We have a Shadow Torch Defiance in our hand that can -4 on our own Brash Taunter, potentially. That's 4 damage. Brash Taunter can fight Bonecrusher Giant. Oh, no. Come on. Faces Kakazan comes down. And trying to do math. And I don't want to screw this up. Right? That would be a terrible, egregious violation. The problem is Kamuna Faces Kakazan did hit our Shadow Torch Defiance, so it can't, the one on board can't negative. It's only at 2 loyalty now. It was at 3. So that's okay, though. We do find the line, thank heavens. Brash Taunter fights the Bonecrusher Giant. Shadow Awaken Inferno negatives or minuses X equals 4. Targets our own Brash Taunter and 4s David's face for the win. Our greedy line does pay off. Don't do that at home, folks. That was dumb. But whatever, it paid off this time. Welcome back, folks. That was wild. We had a great time. I showed you almost all the games. There were 2 different games I didn't show you. 1 win, 1 loss. The loss was uneventful. I got mana screwed, and our opponent capitalized on it. They were playing a Grixis deck. I kind of wish I had actually resolved Magic cards, because it looked like it might have been an interesting match to at least show you. Whether we won or lost, I don't know, but it is what it is. It does happen. And then the win was very similar. We were on the play and had a, you know, just... We played things in the early game, do a thing, and then we played a Shadow Torch Defiance. Our opponent went land the new 2-drop Underdog from New Capenna, and we killed it. We exiled it with Anger of the Gods, as a matter of fact, so it was gone forever. And then they missed their 3rd land, and then on our 4th land, we played Chandra, and our opponent scooped. You know, of course, if they're missing lands over and over and over, and they probably don't have any Planeswalker, dedicated Planeswalker removal that we could see. They were mono black, and this was likely going to ultimate, and they just scooped it up on the spot. But again, not super compelling gameplay, so we left those out. On the whole, again, we played it on stream. I've got it on my Untapped profile. The deck did really well on stream as well. I did have an additional loss that is reflected in my records on there that doesn't really count, because I started a game and then realized I forgot, and I was supposed to 1v1 a viewer, and of course my viewers are more important than my win rate, so I scooped. So the win rate is a little bit, you know, is recording an extra loss. And then these games I actually played on a different computer, because I was doing some YouTube recording on a different computer, so it wasn't tracked there either. So on the whole, though, we had, if we added everything together, we ended up with 20 wins and, you know, out of 47 games for exactly a 60% win rate. In the past, we've played similar decks and been able to achieve just a little bit better than that. It's pretty consistently been in the 62 to 63% ballpark. It could be that maybe our indexing for Winota with these is kind of not required, maybe. Honestly, our win rate against Winota, even when we didn't have these, was still pretty good. So maybe if these were just, I don't know, 4 damage removal spells, like some more Demon Bolts or something like that, that were concessions to Winota but useful in other matchups, maybe we make up that extra couple of percent and do get back up in the 62-63% win rate. But again, over the sample size, I think the deck is still very good, right? I don't think anyone's going to complain about a large sample size 60% win rate deck, you know, in the queues. If you want more than that, you're likely going to have to go to a tier 1 deck, but my sources on untapped.gg say all those other, the actual tier 1 decks are not achieving that percentage. So I know the largest percentage of our win rate is coming about from the fact that we know what the other things are, and if the meta continues to shift and goes away from things like Winota and all that, the win rate on this will likely drop. But for now, if you want to crush the queues and have a great time doing it, I present to you Taunting Winota. I would also like to kind of clarify a little bit. We have a number of new viewers to the channel, and I have playlists. And I'm trying to make historic specifically, but all different, especially non-rotating formats on the client, more accessible. You've seen me play a fair amount of mono red things lately. A couple of different decks and stuff. Well, that's because I'm trying to get you the ability to use some of the cards already on your client. 4 Bonecrusher Giants, 3 or 4 Sweltering Suns, 3 or 4 Anger the Gods. If you have this package, I want you to be able to build a lot of different decks in several different formats that perform relatively well and hopefully have a good time. Similarly, the Chandras here. That's a large commitment of Mythic wildcards, right? 4 here, 3 here, 2 here, something like that. That's a lot. But if you are able to craft them, we're trying to take advantage of them as often as possible. So I know some of you are like, well, but darn it, we've seen a similar deck before. I'd like to see something new. And believe me, there will be content for you. I will be making videos. I shake things up essentially every single video. But I also want to try and flesh out those different things for particularly people who are trying to make the most of their resources available. So if you are the type of person who's like, yeah, I enjoy these decks, and darn it, I want to see more, check out the playlists on the channel, because there are playlists for things like red board sweepers. You will click in there and find a number of decks with Anger the Gods, Sweltering Suns, maybe some Storm's Wrath, depends on the deck and all that thing, right? You can go and click and see Planeswalkers, and you'll see decks. Maybe they share the same Planeswalkers, maybe not, but they will be Planeswalker-themed decks, and likely you will find some of the same usual suspects, so to speak, in those decks. White board sweepers. Things like Doomskars and Wrath of Gods, Day of Judgments, that sort of thing will be there. I've got even a couple of like Collected Company decks for those of you who get down like that. There's some black board sweeper decks with things like Languishes or Rituals of Soot or things like that. And we're trying to flesh out some of those playlists so that you folks can take better advantage of your resources. Thank you to all of you who stayed this far and listened to my spiel. I appreciate you. Anyone who's not subbed, it really, really helps the channel. We're still very small and looking to grow, so I appreciate it if you wouldn't mind doing that. Either way, though, I trust you folks. We'll have a fantastic day. I will catch you all next time.